Welcome everybody. Hope you're having a good day. And yes, by the way, this stuff goes up on YouTube after I fix it. So yeah, it'll be on YouTube after this is done. Let me pick up my heater because it fell over. And it's the only way for me to stay warm. There. Now, we are reading. Actually, let me start. Hello everybody, I am Lady Rain, and this is the Reader's Nook. Today we are going to read The Monkey from the Skeleton Crew by Stephen King. It's going to be a little interesting today, I think. We've got about 30 pages to go through, so let's see what we can get through today, shall we? The Monkey. When Hal Shelburne saw it, when his son Dennis pulled it out of the moldering Ralston Purina carton that had been pushed far back under one attic eave, such a feeling of horror and dismay rose in him that for one moment he thought he would scream. He put one fist in his mouth as if to cram it back, and then nearly coughed into his fist. Neither Terry nor Dennis noticed, but Petey looked around, momentarily curious. "Hey, neat," Dennis said respectfully. It was a tone Hal rarely got from the boy any more himself. Dennis was 12. "What is it?" Peter asked. He glanced at his father again before his eyes were dragged back to the thing his big brother had found. "What is it, Daddy?" "It's a monkey, fart brains," Dennis said. "Haven't you ever seen a monkey before?" "Don't call your brother fart brains," Terry said automatically, and began to examine a box of curtains. The curtains were slimy with mildew, and she dropped them quickly. "Ugh." "Can I have it, Daddy?" Petey asked. He was 9. "What do you mean?" Dennis cried. "I found it." "Boys, please," Terry said. "I'm getting a headache." Hal barely heard them. The monkey glimmered up at him from his older son's hands, grinning, its old familiar grin. The same grin that had haunted his nightmares as a kid, haunted them until he had... Outside a cold gust of wind rose, and for a moment, lips with no flesh blew a long note through the old rusty gutter outside. Petey stepped closer to his father, eyes moving uneasily to the rough attic roof, through which nail heads poked. "What is that, Daddy?" he asked as the whistle died to a guttural buzz. "Just the wind," Hal said, still looking at the monkey, its cymbals, crescents of brass rather than full circles, with the weak light of the one naked bulb, were moveless, perhaps a foot apart. And he added automatically, "Wind can whistle, but it can't carry a tune." Then he realized that was a saying of Uncle Will's, and a goose ran over his grave. The note came again, the wind coming off Crystal Lake in a long, droning swoop, and then wavering in the gutter. Half a dozen small drafts puffed cold October air into Hal's face. God, this place was so much like the back closet of the house in Hartford that they might all have been transported 30 years back in time. I won't think about it, but now, of course, it was all he could think about. In the back closet, where I found that goddamn monkey in that same box. Terry had moved away to examine a wooden crate filled with knickknacks, duck walking, because the pitch of the eaves was so sharp. "I don't like it," Petey said, and he felt for Hal's hand. "Dennis can have it if he wants. Can we go, Daddy?" "Worried about ghosts, chicken guts?" Dennis inquired. "Dennis, stop it," Terry said absently. She picked up a wafer-thin cup with a Chinese pattern. "This is nice. This..." Hal saw that Dennis had found the wind-up key in the monkey's back. Terror flew through him on dark wings. "Don't do that!" It came out more sharply than he had intended, and he had snatched the monkey out of Dennis's hands before he was really aware he had done it. Dennis looked around at him, startled. Terry had also glanced back over her shoulder, and Petey looked up. For a moment they were all silent, and the wind whistled again, very low this time, like an unpleasant invitation. It's probably broken, Hal said. It used to be broken, except when it wanted not to be. Well, you didn't have to grab, Dennis said. Dennis, shut up. Dennis blinked and for a moment looked almost uneasy. Hal hadn't spoke to him so sharply in a long time. Not since he had lost his job at National Aerodyne in California 2 years before, and they had moved to Texas. Dennis decided not to push it, for now. He turned back to the Ralston Purina carton and began to root through it again, but other stuff was nothing but junk. Broken toys, bleeding springs, and stuffings. The wind was louder now, hooting instead of whistling. The attic began to creak softly, making a noise like footsteps. "Please, Daddy," Petey asked, only loud enough for his father to hear. "Yeah," he said. "Terry, let's go." "I'm not through with this." "I said, let's go." It was her turn to look startled. They had taken 2 adjoining rooms in a motel. By 10 that night, the boys were asleep in their room, and Terry was asleep in the adults' room. She had taken 2 Valium on the ride back from the old place in Casco to keep her nerves from giving her a migraine. Trying to turn up the heat. There we go. Just lately, she took a lot of Valium. It had started around the time National Aerodyne had laid Hal off. For the last 2 years, he had been working for Texas Instruments. It was $4,000 less a year, but it was work. He told Terry they were lucky. She agreed. There were plenty of software architects drawing unemployment, he said. She agreed. The company housing in Arnett was every bit as good as the place in Fresno, he said. She agreed. But he thought her agreement to all of it was a lie. And he was losing Dennis. He could feel the kid going, achieving a premature escape velocity so long. Dennis, bye-bye, stranger. It was nice sharing this train with you. Terry said she thought the boy was smoking reefer. She smoked it sometimes. You have to talk to him, Hal. And he agreed. But so far he had not. The boys were asleep. Terry was asleep. Hal went to the bathroom and locked the door and sat down on the closed lid of the John and looked at the monkey. He hated the way it felt. The soft brown nappy hair, worn bald in spots. He hated its grin. That monkey grins just like a nigger. Remember, this is all part of the book. Uncle Will had said once. And it didn't grin like a nigger or anything human. It grinned with, its grin was all teeth, and if you wound up the key, the lips would move. The teeth would seem to get bigger, to become vampire teeth. The lips would writhe and the cymbals would bang. Stupid monkey. Stupid clockwork monkey. Stupid, stupid. He dropped it. His hands were shaken, and he dropped it. The key clicked on the bathroom tile as it struck the floor. The sound seemed very loud in the stillness. It grinned at him with its murky amber eyes, doll's eyes, filled with idiot glee, its brass cymbals poised as if to strike up a march for some band from hell. On the bottom, the words "Made in Hong Kong" were stamped. "You can't be here," he whispered. "I threw you down the well when I was 9. The monkey grinned up at him. Outside in the night, a black capful of wind shook the motel. Hal's brother Bill and Bill's wife Colette met up at Uncle Will's and Aunt Ida's the next day. Did it ever cross your mind that a death in the family was really a lousy way to renew family connections? A family connection, Bill asked him, with a bit of a grin. He had been named for Uncle Will. Will and Bill, champions of the rodeo, Uncle Will used to say, and ruffled Bill's hair. It was one of his sayings, like the wind can whistle, but it can't carry a tune. Uncle Will had died 6 years before, and Aunt Ida had lived on here alone, until a stroke had taken her just the previous week. Very sudden. Bill had said when he called long distance to give Hal the news. As if he could know, as if anyone could know, she had died alone. Yeah, Hal said. The thought crossed my mind. They looked at the place together, the home place where they had finished growing up. Their father, a merchant marrier, had simply disappeared, as if from the very face of the earth, when they were young. Bill claimed to remember him vaguely, but Hal with no memories of him at all. Their mother had died when Bill was 10 and Hal 8. Aunt Ida had brought them here on the Greyhound bus, which left from Hartford, and they had been raised here and gone to college from here. This had been the place they were homesick for. Bill had stayed in Maine and now had a healthy law practice in Portland. Hal saw that Petey had wandered off toward the blackberry tangles that lay on the eastern side of the house in a mad jumble. "Stay away from there, Petey," he called. Petey looked back, questioning. Hal felt simple love for the boy rush him, and he suddenly thought of the monkey again. "Why, Dad?" "The old well's back there someplace," Bill said. "But I'll be damned if I can remember just where. Your dad's right, Petey. It's a good place to stay away from. Thorns'll do a job on you, right, Hal?" "Right," Hal said automatically. Petey moved away, not looking back, and then started down the embankment toward the small shingle of beach where Dennis was skipping stones over the water. Hal felt something in his chest loosen a little. Bill might have forgotten where the old well was, but late that afternoon Hal went to it unearingly, shouldering his way through the brambles that tore at his old flannel jacket and hunted for his eyes. He reached it and stood there, breathing hard, looking at the rotted, warped boards that covered it. After a moment's debate, he knelt. His knees fired twin pistol shots and moved two of the boards aside. From the bottom of that wet, rock-lined throat, a drowning face stared up at him, wide eyes, grimacing mouth. A moan escaped him. It was not loud except in his heart. There it had been very loud. It was his own face in the dark water, not the monkey's. For a moment he had thought it was the monkey's. He was shaking all over. "I threw it down the well. I threw it down the well. Please, God, don't let me be crazy. I threw it down the well." The well had gone dry the summer Johnny McCabe died, the year after Bill and Hal came to stay with Uncle Will and Aunt Ida. Uncle Will had borrowed money from the bank to have an artesian well sunk, and the blackberry tangles had grown up around the old dug well, the dry well. Except the water had come back, like the monkey. This time the memory would not be denied. Hal sat there helplessly, letting it come, trying to get with it, to ride it like a surfer riding a monster wave that will crush him if he falls off his board, just trying to get through it so it would be gone again. He had crept out here with the monkey late that summer, and the blackberries had been out, the smell of them thick and cloying. No one came in here to pick, although Aunt Ida would sometimes stand at the edge of the tangles and pick a cupful of berries in her apron. And here the blackberries had gone past ripe to overripe. Some of them were rotting, sweating a thick white fluid like pus, and the chickens were the chickens sang maddeningly in the high grass underfoot, their endless cry. The thorns tore at him, brought dots of blood onto his cheeks and bare arms. He made no effort to avoid their sting. He had been blind with terror, so blind that he had come within inches of stumbling onto the rotten boards that covered the well, perhaps within inches of crashing 30 feet to the well's muddy bottom. He had pinwheeled his arms for balance, and more thorns had branded his forearms. It was that memory that had caused him to call Petey back sharply. That was the day Johnny McCabe died, his best friend. Johnny had been climbing the rungs to his treehouse in his backyard. The two of them had spent many hours up there that summer, playing pirate, seeing make-believe galleons out on the lake, unlimbering the cannons, reefing the stunzel, whatever that was, preparing to board. Johnny had been climbing up to the treehouse, as he had done 1,000 times before, and the rung just below the trap door in the bottom of the treehouse had snapped off in his hands, and Johnny had fallen 30 feet to the ground. What?
I have frozen stuff, that's why I came here.
What'd you buy?
Pizza.
For dinner?
And you say you didn't know what to make for dinner.
We're having pizza?
I guess.
Pizza's good. Alright. I'll be down here a while reading. Johnny had fallen 30 feet to the ground and had broken his neck. And it was the monkey's fault. The monkey. The goddamn hateful monkey. When the phone rang, when Aunt Ida's mouth dropped open and then formed an O of horror as her friend Millie from down the road told her the news. When Aunt Ida said, "Come out on the porch, Hal. I have to tell you some bad news." He had thought with sick horror, the monkey, what's the monkey done now? There had been no reflection of his face trapped at the bottom of the well that day he threw the monkey down. Only stone cobbles and the stink of wet mud. He had looked at the monkey lying there on the wiry grass and grew between the blackberry tangles. My forehead itches. Its cymbals poised, its grinning teeth huge between its splayed lips, its fur rubbed away in balding, mangy patches here and there. Its glazed eyes. "I hate you," he hissed at it. He wrapped his hand around its loathsome body, feeling the nappy fur wrinkle. It grinned at him as he held it in front of his face. "Go on," he dared it, beginning to cry for the first time that day. He shook it, the poised cymbals trembling minutely. The monkey spoiled everything good. Everything. "Go on, clap them, clap them." The monkey only grinned. "Go on, clap them." His voice rose hysterically. Fraidy cat, go on and clap them. I dare you, double dare you." Its brownish yellow eyes, its huge, gleeful teeth. He threw it down the well then, mad with grief and terror. He saw it turn over once on its way down, a simian acrobat doing a trick, and the sun glinted one last time on those cymbals. It struck the bottom with a thud, and that must have jogged its clockwork, for suddenly the cymbals did begin to beat. Their steady, deliberate, and tinny banging rose to his ears, echoing in fey in the stone throat of the deep well. Jang, 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 jang. Hal clapped his hands over his mouth, and for a moment he could see it down there, perhaps only in the eye of imagination, lying there in the mud, eyes glaring up at the small circle of his boy's face, peering over the lip of the well, as if marking that face forever, his lips expanding and contracting around those grinning teeth, cymbals clapping, funny wind-up monkey. Jang, 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 jang. Who's dead? Jang, 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 jang. Is it Johnny McCabe, falling with his eyes wide, doing his own acrobatic somersault as he falls through the bright summer vacation air with the splintered rung still held in his hands, to strike the ground with the single bitter, snapping sound. With blood flying out of his nose and mouth and wide eyes. Is it Johnny, Hal? Or is it you? Moaning, Hal had shoved the boards across the hole, getting splinters in his hands, not caring, not even aware of them until later. And still he could hear it, even through the boards, muffled now, and somehow all the worse for it. It was down there in stone-faced dark, clapping its cymbals and jerking its repulsive body, the sound coming up like sounds heard in a dream. Jang, 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 jang. Who's dead this time? He fought and battered his way back through the blackberry creepers. Thorns stitched fresh lines of welling blood briskly across his face and buttocks, caught in the cuffs of his jeans, and he fell full length once, his ears still jangling, as if it had followed him. Uncle Will found him later, sitting on an old tire in the garage and sobbing. And he had thought Hal was crying for his dead friend. So he had been, and he had also cried in the aftermath of terror. He had thrown the monkey down the well in the afternoon, that evening, as twilight crept in through the shimmering mantle of ground fog, a car moving too fast for the reduced visibility that ran down Aunt Ida's Manx cat in the road, and gone right on. There had been guts everywhere Bill had thrown up, but Hal had only turned his face away, his pale, still face, hearing Aunt Ida sobbing. This was the top of the news. This is on top of the news about the McCabe boy had caused a fit of weeping that was almost hysterics, and it was almost 2 hours before Uncle Will could calm him completely. As if from miles away, in his heart there was a cold and exultant joy. It hadn't been his turn. It had been Aunt Ida's Manx, not him, not his brother Bill, or his Uncle Will. Just two champions of the rodeo, and now the monkey was gone. It was down the well, and one scruffy Manx cat with ear mites was not too great a price to pay. If the monkey wanted to clap its hellish cymbals now, let it. It could clap and clash them for the crawling bugs and beetles, the dark things that made their home in the well's stone gullet. It would rot down there. Its loathsome cogs. Wow. Its loathsome cogs and wheels and springs would rust down there. It would die down there. In the mud and the darkness, spiders would spin it a shroud. But it had come back. Slowly Hal covered the well again, and as he had on that day, and in his ears he heard the phantom echo of the monkey's cymbals. Jang, 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 jang. Who's dead, Hal? Is it Terry? Dennis? Is it Petey, Hal? He's your favorite, isn't he? Is it him? Jang, jang, jang. Put that down! Petey flinched and dropped the monkey. For one nightmare moment, Hal thought that would do it. That the jolt would jog its machinery and the cymbals would begin to beat and clash. Daddy, you scared me. I'm sorry, I don't want you to play with that. The others had gone to see a movie, and he had thought he would beat them back to the motel. But he had stayed at the home place longer than he had thought he would have guessed. The old hateful memories seemed to move on their own eternal time zone. Terry was sitting near Dennis watching the Beverly Hillbillies. She watched the old grainy print with a steady bemused concentration that spoke of the recent Valium pop. Dennis was reading a rock magazine with Culture Club on the cover. Petey had been sitting cross-legged on the carpet goofing with the monkey. It doesn't work anyway, Petey said, which explains why Dennis let him have it, Hal thought, and then felt ashamed and angry at himself. He felt his uncontrollable hostility toward Dennis more and more often, but in the aftermath, he felt demeaned and tacky, helpless. No, he said, it's old. I'm going to throw it away. Give it to me. He held out his hands, and Peter, looking troubled, handed it over. Dennis said to his mother, Pop's turning into a freaking schizophrenic. Hal was across the room even before he knew Hal was across the room before he knew he was going. The monkey in one hand, grinning as if in approbation. He hauled Dennis out of his chair by his shirt. There was a purring sound as a seam came adrift somewhere. Dennis looked almost comically shocked. His copy of Rockwave fell to the floor. Hey! You! Come with me, Hal said grimly, pulling his son toward the door to the connecting room. Hal! Terry nearly screamed. Petey just goggled. Hal pulled Dennis through. He slammed the door and then slammed Dennis against the door. Dennis was starting to look scared. You're getting a mouth problem, Hal said. Let go of me! You tore my shirt, you... Hal slammed the boy against the door again. Yes, he said. A real mouth problem. Did you learn that in school? Or back in the smoking area? Dennis flushed, his face momentarily ugly with guilt. I wouldn't be in that shitty school if you didn't get canned, he burst out. Hal slammed Dennis against the door again. I didn't get canned. I got laid off. You know it. And I don't need any of your shit about it. You have problems? Welcome to the world, Dennis. Just don't lay all of them on me. You're eating, your ass is covered, you're 12 years old, and at 12, I don't need any shit from you. He punctuated each phrase by pulling the boy forward until their noses were almost touching, and then slammed Dennis back into the door. It was not hard enough to hurt, but Dennis was scared. His father had not laid a hand on him since they moved to Texas, and now he began to cry with the young boy's loud, braying, healthy sobs. Go ahead, beat me up, he yelled at Hal, his face twisted and blotchy. Beat me up if you want. I know how much you fucking hate me. I don't hate you. I love you a lot, Dennis. But I'm your dad, and you're going to show me respect, or I'm going to bust you for it. Dennis tried to pull away. Hal pulled the boy to him and hugged him. Dennis fought for a moment, and then he put his face against Hal's chest and wept as if exhausted. It was a sort of cry Hal hadn't heard from either of his children in years. He closed his eyes, realizing he felt exhausted himself. Terry began to hammer on the other side of the door. Stop it, Hal! Whatever you're doing to him, stop it! I'm not killing him, Hal said. Go away, Terry. Don't you? It's all right, Mom, Dennis said, muffled against Hal's chest. He could feel her perplexed silence for a moment, and then she went. Hal looked at his son again. I'm sorry I bad-mouthed you, Dad, Dennis said reluctantly. Okay, I accept that with thanks. When we get home next week, I'm going to wait 2 or 3 days, and then I'm going to go through all your drawers, Dennis. If there's something in them you don't want me to see, you better get rid of it. That flash of guilt again. Dennis lowered his eyes and wiped away snot with the back of his hand. Can I go now? He sounded sullen once more. Sure, Hal said, and let him go. Gotta take him camping in the spring, just the two of us, do some fishing, like Uncle Will used to do with Bill and me. Gotta get it close to him, gotta try. He sat down on the bed in the empty room and looked at the monkey. You'll never be close to him again, Hal, its grin seemed to say. Count on it. I am back to take care of business, just like you always knew I would be, someday. Hal laid the monkey aside and put a hand over his eyes. That night, Hal stood in the bathroom, brushing his teeth, and thought, it was in the same box. How could it be in the same box? The toothbrush jabbed upward, hurting his gums. He winced. He had been 4, Bill 6, the first time he saw the monkey. Their missing father had bought a house in Hartford, and it had been theirs, free and clear, before he died or fell into the hole in the middle of the world or whatever it had been. Mother worked as a secretary at Holmes Aircraft, the helicopter plant out in Westville, and a series of sitters came in to stay with the boys, except by then it was just Hal that the sitters had to mind through the day. Bill was in first grade, big school. None of the babysitters stayed for long. They got pregnant and married their boyfriends or got work at homes, or Mrs. Shelburne would discover they had been at the cooking sherry or her bottle of brandy, which was kept in the sideboard for special occasions. Most were stupid girls who seemed only to want to eat or sleep. None of them wanted to read to Hal as his mother would do. The sitter that long winter was a huge, sleek, black girl named Beulah. She fawned over Hal when Hal's mother was around, and sometimes pinched him when she wasn't. Still, Hal had some liking for Beulah, who once in a while would read him a lurid tale from one of her confession or true detective magazines. Death came for the voluptuous redhead, Beulah would intone ominously in the dozy daylight silence of the living room, and pop another Reese's peanut butter cup into her mouth while Hal solemnly studied the grainy tabloid pictures and drank milk from his wish cup. The liking made what happened worse. It made it worse. He found the monkey on a cold, cloudy day in March. Sleet ticked sporadically off the windows, and Beulah was asleep on the couch, a copy of my story tented open on her admirable bosom. Hal had crept into the back closet to look at his father's things. The back closet was a storage space that ran the length of the second floor on the left side. Extra space that had never been finished off. You got into it by using a small door, a down the rabbit hole sort of door on Bill's side of the boys' room. They both liked to go in there, even though it was chilly in winter and hot enough in summer to wring a bucketful of sweat out of your pores. Long and narrow and somehow snug, the back closet was full of fascinating junk. No matter how much stuff you looked at, you never seemed to be able to look at it all. He and Bill had spent whole Saturday afternoons up here, barely speaking to each other, taking things out of boxes, examining them, turning them over and over so their hands could absorb each unique reality, putting them back. Now Hal wondered if he and Bill hadn't been trying, as best they could, to somehow make contact with their vanished father. He had been a merchant mariner with a navigator's certificate, but there were stacks of charts in the closet, some marked with neat circles, and a dimple of the compass's swing point in the center of each. There were 20 volumes of something called Baron's Guide to Navigation, a set of cockeyed binoculars that made your eyes feel hot and funny if you looked through them too long. There were touristy things from a dozen ports of call, rubber hula dolls, a black cardboard bowler with a torn band that said, "You pick a girl and I'll pick a dilly," a glass globe with a tiny Eiffel Tower inside. There were envelopes with foreign stamps tucked carefully away inside, and foreign coins. There were rock samples from the Hawaiian island of Maui, a glassy black, heavy and somehow ominous, and funny records in foreign languages. That day, with a sleet ticking hypnotically off the roof just above his head, Hal worked his way all the way down to the far end of the back closet, moved a box aside, and saw another box behind it, a Ralston Purina box. Looking over the top with a pair of glassy hazel eyes. Oh, looking over the top was a pair of glassy hazel eyes. They gave him a start, and he skittered back for a moment, heart thumping, as if he had discovered a deadly pygmy. Then he saw its silence, the gaze in those eyes, and realized it was some sort of toy. He moved forward again and lifted it carefully from the box. It grinned its ageless, toothy grin with the yellow light, its cymbals held apart. Delighted, Hal had turned it this way and that, feeling the crinkle of its nappy fur. Its funny grin pleased him. Yet, hadn't there been something else? An almost instinctive feeling of disgust that had come and gone almost before he was aware of it. Perhaps it was so, but with an old memory like this one, you had to be careful not to believe too much. Old memories could lie. But hadn't he seen that same expression on Petey's face in the attic of the home place? He had seen the key set into the small of its back and turned it. It had turned far too easily. There were no winding up clicks. Broken but still neat. He took it out to play with. "What you got, Hal?" Beulah asked, waking up from her nap. "Nothing," Hal said. "I found it." He put it up on the shelf on his side of the bedroom. It stood atop his Lassie coloring books, grinning, staring into space, cymbals poised. It was broken, but it grinned nonetheless. That night Hal awakened from some uneasy dream, bladder full, and got up to use the bathroom in the hall. Bill was breathing lump of covers across the room. Hal came back, almost asleep again. Suddenly, the monkey began to beat its cymbals together in the darkness. Jang, 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 jang. He came fully awake, as if snapped in the face with a cold, wet towel. His heart gave a staggering leap of surprise, and a tiny mouse-like squeak escaped his throat. He stared at the monkey, eyes wide, lips trembling. Jang, 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 jang. Its body rocked and humped on the shelf. Its lips spread and closed, hideously gleeful, revealing huge and carnivorous teeth. "Stop!" Hal whispered. "Stop!" His brother turned over and uttered a loud, single snore. All else was silent except for the monkey. The cymbals clapped and clashed, and surely it would wake his brother, his mother, the world. It would wake the dead. Jang, 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 jang. Hal moved toward it, meaning to stop it somehow. Perhaps put his hand between the cymbals until it ran down, and then it stopped on its own. The cymbals came together one last time. Jang! And then spread slowly apart to their original position. The brass glimmered in the shadows. The monkey's dirty, yellowish teeth grinned. The house was silent again. His mother turned over in her bed and echoed Bill's single snore. Hal got back into his own bed and pulled the covers up, his heart beating fast, and he thought, "I'll put it back in the closet tomorrow. I don't want it." But the next morning he forgot all about putting the monkey back because his mother didn't go to work. Beulah was dead. Their mother wouldn't tell them exactly what happened. It was an accident, just a terrible accident, was all she would say. But at that afternoon, Bill bought a newspaper on his way home from school and smuggled page 4 up to their room under his shirt. Bill read the article haltingly to Hal, while their mother cooked supper in the kitchen. But Hal could read the headline for himself. 2 killed in apartment shootout. Beulah McCaffrey, 19, and Sally Tremont, 20, had been shot by Miss McCaffrey's boyfriend, Leonard White, 25, following an argument over who was to go out and pick up the order of Chinese food. They died over Chinese food. Mrs. Tremont had expired at Hartford receiving. Beulah McCaffrey had been pronounced dead at the scene. It was like Beulah just disappeared into one of her own detective magazines. Hal Shelburne thought, and felt a cold chill run up his spine and then circle his heart. And then he realized the shootings had occurred at the same time the monkey. "Hal?" It was Terry's voice, sleepy. "Coming to bed?" He spat toothpaste in the sink and rinsed his mouth. "Yes," he said. He had put the monkey in his suitcase earlier and locked it up. They were flying back to Texas in 2 to 3 days, but before they went, he would get rid of the damn thing for good. Somehow. "You were pretty rough on Dennis this afternoon," Terry said in the dark. Dennis had needed somebody to start getting rough on him for quite a while now, I think. He's been drifting. I just don't want him to start falling. Psychologically, beating the boy isn't a very productive. I didn't beat him, Terry, for Christ's sake. Way to assert parental authority. Oh, don't give me any of that counter group shit, Hal said angrily. I can see you don't want to discuss this. Her voice was cold. I told him to get the dope out of the house, too. You did? Now that sounded apprehensive. How did he take it? What did he say? Come on, Terry. What could he say? You're fired? Hal, what's the matter with you? You're not like this. What's wrong? Nothing, he said, thinking of the monkey locked away in his Samsonite. Would he hear it if it began to clap its cymbals? Yes, he surely would. Muffled, but audible. Clapping doom for someone, as it had for Beulah, Johnny McCabe, Uncle Will's dog Daisy. Jang, 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 jang. Is it you, Hal? I've just been under a strain. I hope that's all it is. But I don't like you this way. No? The words escaped before he could stop them. He didn't want to stop them. He didn't even want to stop them. So pop a Valium and everything will look okay again. He heard her draw a breath in and let it out shakily. She began to cry then. He could have comforted her, maybe. But there seemed to be no comfort in him. There was too much terror. It would be better when the monkey was gone again. Gone for good. Please, God. Gone for good. He lay wakeful until very late, until morning began to gray the air outside. But he thought he knew what to do. Bill had found the monkey the second time. That was about a year and a half after Beulah McCaffrey had been announced dead at the scene. It was summer. Pronounced dead at the scene. It was summer. Hal had just finished kindergarten. He came in from playing, and his mother called, "Wash your hands, senor! You are filthy like a pig." She was on the porch, drinking an iced tea and reading a book. It was her vacation. She had 2 weeks. Hal gave his hands a token pass under cold water and printed dirt on the hand towel. Where's Bill? Upstairs. You tell him to clean his side of the room. It's a mess. Hal, who enjoyed being the messenger of unpleasant news in such matters, rushed up. Bill was sitting on the floor. The small down-the-rabbit-hole door leading to the back closet was ajar. He had the monkey in his hands. That's busted, Hal said immediately. He was apprehensive, although he barely remembered coming back from the bathroom that night, and the monkey suddenly beginning to clap its cymbals. A week or so late after that, he had had a bad dream about the monkey and Beulah. He couldn't remember exactly what, and had awakened screaming, thinking for a moment that the soft weight on his chest was the monkey, that he would open his eyes and see it grinning down at him. But of course the soft weight had only been his pillow, clutched with panicky tightness. His mother came in to soothe him with a drink of water and 2 chalky orange baby aspirin, those volumes of childhood's troubled times. She thought it was a fact of Beulah's death that had caused the nightmare. So it was, but not in the way she thought. He barely remembered any of this now, but the monkey still scared him, particularly its cymbals and its teeth. I know that, Bill said, and tossed the monkey aside. It's stupid. It landed on Bill's bed, staring up at the ceiling, cymbals poised. Hal did not like to see this. You want to go down to Terry's and get popsicles? I spent my allowance today, Hal said. Besides, Mom says you got to clean up your side of the room. I can do that later, Bill said. And I'll loan you a nickel if you want. Bill was not above giving Hal an Indian rope burn sometimes, and would occasionally trip him up or punch him on for no particular reason, but mostly he was okay. Sure, Hal said gratefully. I'll just put the busted monkey back in the closet first. Nah, Bill said, getting up. Let's go, go, go. Hal went. Bill's moods were changeable, and if he paused to put the monkey away, he might lose his popsicle. He went down to Teddy's and got them. Teddy's. It's Teddy's. Teddy's and got them, and not just one popsicle either, but but not any popsicle, but the rare blueberry ones. Then they went down to the rec where some kids were getting up a baseball game. Hal was too small to play, but he sat far out in the foul territory, sucking his blueberry popsicle and chasing what the big kids called Chinese home runs. He didn't get home until after dark. They didn't get home till after almost dark. And their mother whacked Hal for getting the hand towel dirty, and whacked Bill for not cleaning his side of the room. And after supper there was TV, and by the time all of that happened, Hal had forgotten all about the monkey. It somehow found its way up onto Bill's shelf, where it stood right next to Bill's autograph picture of Bill Boyd. And there it stayed for nearly 2 years. By the time Hal was 7, babysitters had become an extravagance, and Mrs. Shelburn's parting shot each morning was, "Bill, look after your brother." That day, however, Bill had stayed after school, and Hal came home alone, stopping at each corner until he could see absolutely no traffic coming in either direction, and then skittering across, shoulders hunched, like a doughboy crossing no man's land. He let himself into the house with the key under the mat and went immediately to the refrigerator for a glass of milk. He got the bottle, and then it slipped through his fingers and crashed to smithereens on the floor, pieces of glass flying everywhere. Jang, 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 jang from upstairs in the bedroom. Jang, jang, jang. "Hi, Hal. Welcome home. And by the way, Hal, is it you? Is it you this time? Are they going to find you dead at the scene?" He stood there, immobile, looking down at the broken glass and the puddle of milk full of terror he could not name or understand. It was simply there, seeming to ooze from his pores. He turned and rushed upstairs to his room. The monkey stood on Bill's shelf, seeming to stare at him. The monkey had knocked the autograph picture of Bill Boyd face down onto Bill's bed. The monkey rocked and grinned and beat its cymbals together. Hal approached it slowly, not wanting to, but not able to stay away. Its cymbals jerked apart and clashed together and jerked apart again. As he got closer, he could hear the clockwork running in the monkey's guts. Abruptly, uttering a cry of revulsion and terror, he swatted it from the shelf in one might swat a bug. As one might swap a bug. It struck Bill's pillow and then fell on the floor, cymbals beating together. Jang, 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 lips flexing and closing as it lay there on the back in the patch of late April sunshine. Aw, she exhausted herself. Hal kicked it with one busted brown, kicked it as hard as he could, and this time the cry that escaped him was one of fury. The clockwork monkey skittered across the floor, bouncing off the wall, and lay still. Hal stood staring at it, fists bunched, heart pounding. It grinned saucily back at him. The sun of a burning pinpoint in one glass eye. "Kick me all you want," it seemed to tell him. "It's nothing but cogs and wheel work, and worm gear, too. Kick me all you feel like. I'm not real. Just a funny clockwork monkey is all I am. And who's dead? There's been an explosion at the helicopter plant? What? That's rising up into the sky like a big bloody bowling ball with eyes where the finger holes should be? Is that your mother's head, Hal? Whee! What a ride your mother's head is having." Or down at Brook Street corner. "Looky here, pard, the car is going too fast. The driver was drunk. There's one Bill less in the world." Could you hear the crunching sound when the wheels ran over his skull and his brain squirted out his eyes? Yes? No? Maybe? Don't ask me. I don't know. I can't know. All I know how to do is beat these cymbals together. Jang, jang, jang. And who's dead at the scene, Hal? Your mother? Your brother? Or is it you, Hal? Is it you? He rushed at it again, meaning to stomp it, smash it, jump on it until clogs and gears flew and its horrible glass eyes rolled along the floor. But just as he reached it, its cymbals came together once more, very softly. Jang! As the spring somehow inside expanded, one final minute touch, and a sliver of ice seemed to whisper its way through the walls of his heart, impaling it, stilling its fur, and leaving him sick with terror. The monkey almost seemed to know. How gleeful its grin seemed. He picked it up, tweezing one of its arms between the thumb and forefinger of his right hand, mouth drowned down in the blow of loathing, as if it was a corpse he held. Its mangy fake fur seemed hot and fevered against his skin. He fumbled open the tiny door that led to the back closet and turned on the bulb. The monkey grinned at him as he crawled down the length of the storage area between boxes piled on top of boxes, past the set of navigation books and the photograph albums with their fume of old chemicals and the sovereigns and the old clothes. Hal thought, if it begins to clap its cymbals together now and move in my hand, I'll scream. And if I scream, I'll do more than grin. It'll do more than grin. It'll start to laugh at me, and then I'll go crazy, and they'll find me in here, drooling and laughing crazily. I'll be crazy. Please, dear God. Please, dear Jesus, don't let me go crazy. He reached the far end and clawed 2 boxes aside, spilling one of them, and jammed the monkey back into the Ralston Purina box in the furthest corner. And it leaned in there, comfortably, as if home at last, cymbals poised, grinning its similar grin, as if the joke were still on Hal. He crawled backwards, sweating hot and cold, all fire and ice, waiting for the cymbals to begin. And when they began, the monkey would leap from its box and scurry beetle-like toward him, clockwork rolling, cymbals clashing madly, and none of that happened. He turned off the light and slammed the small, down the rabbit hole door and leaned on it, panting. At last he began to feel a little better. He went downstairs on rubbery legs, got an empty bag, and began carefully to pick up the jagged shards and splinters of the broken milk bottle, wondering if he was going to cut himself and bleed to death, if that was what the clapping cymbals had meant. But that didn't happen either. He got a towel and wiped up the milk, and then sat down to see if his mother and brother would come home. His mother came first, asking, "Where's Bill?" In a low, colorless voice, not sure that Bill must be dead at the same scene, Hal started to explain about the school play meeting, knowing that, even giving a very long meeting, Bill should have been home half an hour ago. His mother looked at him curiously, started to ask what was wrong, and then the door opened and Bill came in. Only it was not Bill. Not really. This was a ghost Bill, pale and silent. "What's wrong?" Miss Shelburne exclaimed. "Bill, what's wrong?" Bill began to cry, and they got the story through his tears. There had been a car, he said. He and his friend Charlie Silverman were walking home together after the meeting, and the car came around Brook Street corner too fast, and Charlie had frozen. Bill had tugged Charlie's hand once, but had lost his grip in the car. Bill began to bray out loud, hysterical sobs, and his mother hugged him to her, rocking him. And Hal looked out on the porch and saw two policemen standing there. The squad car in which they had conveyed Bill home was standing on the curb. Then he began to cry himself, but his tears were tears of relief. It was Bill's turn to have nightmares now, dreams in which Charlie Silverman's death died over and over again, knocked out of his Red Ryder cowboy boots, and was flipped onto the hood of a rusty Hudson Hornet the drunk had been piloting. Charlie Silverman's head and the Hudson's wheelchair, I can't read today, windshield had met with explosive force. Checking on my puppy. Both had shattered. The drunk driver, who owned a candy store in Milford, suffered a heart attack shortly before being taken into custody. Perhaps it was the sight of Charlie Silverman's brains drying on his pants, and his lawyer was quite successful at the trial with his "this man has been punished enough" theme. The drunk was given 60 days suspended and lost his privilege to own a motor vehicle in the state of Connecticut for 5 years, which is about as long as Bill Shelburn's nightmares lasted. The monkey had hidden away again in the back of the closet, but never noticed it was gone from his shelf. Or if he died, he never would. Oh, Bill never noticed it gone. Hal felt safe for a while. He even began to forget about the monkey again and to believe it had only been a bad dream. When he came home from school on the afternoon, his mother died. It was back on the shelf, cymbals poised, grinning down at him. He approached it slowly, as if from outside himself, as if his own body had been turned into a wind-up toy at the sight of the monkey. He saw his hands reach out and take it down. He felt the nappy fur crinkled under his hand, and the feeling was muffled. Mere pleasure, as if someone had shot him full of Novocaine. He could hear his breathing, quick and dry, like the rattle of wind through straw. Oh, I know what I was checking. He turned over and grasped the key, and years later he would think that his drugged fascination was like that of a man who puts a 6-shooter in one loaded chamber against the closed and jittering eyelids and pulls the trigger. No, don't. Let it alone. Throw it away. Don't touch it. He turned the key, and in the silence he heard the perfect tiny series of winding up clicks. When he let go. When he let the key go, the monkey began to clap its cymbals together, and he could feel its body jerking, bend and jerk, as if it were alive. It was alive, writhing in his hand like some loathsome pygmy, and the vibration he felt through its balding brown fur was not that of turning cogs in the beating of his heart. With a groan, Hal dropped the monkey and backed away, fingernails digging into the flesh under his eyes, palms pressed to his mouth. He stumbled over something and nearly lost his balance. Then he would have been right down on the floor with it. His bulging blue eyes looking into the glassy hazel ones. He scrambled toward the door, backed through it, slammed it, leaned against it. Suddenly, he bolted for the bathroom and vomited. It was Mrs. Stuckey from the helicopter plant who brought the news and stayed with them. Those four, I got itch on my eyeball, sorry. Those first 2 endless nights, until Aunt Ida got down from Maine. Their mother had died of a brain embolism in the middle of the afternoon. She had been standing at the water cooler with a cup of water in one hand and had crumpled as if shot, still holding the paper cup in her hand. With the others, she had clawed at the water cooler and had pulled the great glass bottle of Portland water down on her. It had shattered. But the plant doctor who came on the run said later that he believed Mrs. Shelburne was dead before the water had soaked through her dress and her underclothes to wet her skin. The boys were never told any of this, but Hal knew anyway. He dreamed it again and again on the long nights following his sister's death. "You still have trouble getting to sleep, little brother?" Bill asked him, and Hal supposed Bill thought all the thrashing and bad dreams had to do with their mother dying so suddenly. And that was right, but only partly right. There was the guilt, the certain deadly knowledge that he had killed his mother by winding the monkey up on the sunny after-school afternoon. When Hal fell asleep, his sleep must have been deep. When he awoke, it was nearly noon. Petey was sitting cross-legged in the chair across the room, methodically eating an orange section by section and watching a game show on TV. Hal swung his legs out of bed, feeling as if someone had punched him down into sleep and then punched him back out of it. His head throbbed. "Where's your mother, Petey?" Petey glanced around. "She and Dennis went shopping. I said I'd hang out here with you. Do you always talk in your sleep, Dad?" Hal looked at him cautiously. "No, what did I say?" "I couldn't make it out. It scared me a little." "Well, here I am in the right mind again. Here I am in my right mind again," Hal said, and managed a small grin. Petey grinned back, and Hal felt simple love for the boy again, with emotion that was bright and strong and uncomplicated. He wondered why he had always been able to feel so good about Petey, to feel he understood Petey and could help him, but why Dennis seemed like a window too dark to look through, a mystery in his ways and habits, the sort of boy he could not understand because he had never been that sort of boy. It was too easy to say that the movie from California had changed Dennis, or that. His thoughts froze. The monkey. The monkey was sitting on the windowsill, cymbals poised. Hal felt his heartbeat stop in his closet, and then suddenly began to gallop. His vision wavered, and his throbbing head began to ache ferociously. I'm going to have to stop, guys. I know we only have 15 pages, but my eyes are all wonky. So we're going to stop there, and we will continue later. I will try to get back on here tonight, but I need to give my eyes a rest. So I'm going to let you guys go. This is going up on YouTube. It's the Reader's Nook YouTube page. So you guys have a good day. I love y'all. Stay happy. Bye.